Welcome to the Book Club of the Lotus Eaters. This time we're going to be going through The Long March, How the Left Won the Culture War and What to Do About It by Marc Sidwell. So this is a book, you went to do the interview with Peter
Yeah,
Whittle.
I had an interview with Peter Whittle on his new Culture Forum, and afterwards he recommended me this book. And it's not that I didn't want to read it, it's just that my reading list is already piled high with other things, and so I thought I'd pass it on to you to read it and then tell me all about it.
Yeah, so then we can tell you about it. So first thing to mention, just a broad overview of the book. Very well made book for normies, so if you want to explain the Culture War. And then right up to the last two chapters, it turns into something made for like veterans of the Culture War. It's like Goldstein's book at that point, so that's why I'm actually quite excited about it. Because I was a bit
For anyone who doesn't get that reference, Goldstein in 1984 has a forbidden book that is given to Winston and explains the world, why this is happening, and presumably what can be done about it, but he doesn't get that far into it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So it also focuses on the UK a lot, so American viewers, sorry if that some of the things go over your head, we'll try and do recommends for that. But everything in there obviously applies to everything within the Anglosphere, because the culture camp, or whatever you'd call it, goes on throughout the Anglosphere.
What are the left calling it?
Culture camp.
Anyway.
So we're going to skim through what I find interesting, given how most viewers are also veterans of the Culture War. We'll skim over some of the earlier stuff if we can. But I want it to be known that this is basically a perfect book to give to a blue-pilled friend or family member. Like, if they know nothing about the Culture War stuff, they're like, you try and explain it to them and they don't get it. This will work.
Excellent.
Anyway, so first and foremost, the thing he lays out is the examples of the Conservatives utterly failing in this sphere, and the best example has to be the Sir Roger Scruton affair. So, he describes it. In 2019, the late Sir Roger Scruton, then Britain's most famous living philosopher, was accused of racism and removed from his government appointment because George Eaton of the New Statesman, who then posted a photo of himself on Instagram, which he later deleted, in which he was drinking from a bottle of champagne, captioned, "The feeling when you get right-wing racist and homophobe Roger Scruton sacked as a Tory government advisor." Very, very honest.
Yes.
So this guy did an interview, and then he tweeted that photo of himself.
Yeah.
And the interview he leaked was one that made Roger Scruton out to be a racist.
Yeah, but it wasn't. He wasn't even saying anything that controversial or anything like that. It was just, if you take it out of context and then imply that he is being a racist, then there we go.
Yeah.
You've got your victim.
The Conservatives were useless. So, first quotes, Johnny Mercer MP said of his dismissal, "Let's not take our time."
Why?
The best philosopher you've got for your own ideology has given his entire life to it.
He's like Britain's only conservative philosopher.
The only one that was living at the time, as he mentions. And they're just like, yeah, get rid of him. George Osborne, former Chancellor and the then current editor of the Evening Standard, called for Scruton's remarks to be branded as bigoted and tweeted, "How can Downing Street possibly keep Roger Scruton as a government advisor?" Because he did nothing wrong. And also because he's your only conservative theorist.
And also because you don't take your marching orders from left-wingers on Twitter, do you?
Yeah. A Tory Lord and Times columnist replied to George Osborne saying, "I agree." So the Conservatives utterly collapsed on this point.
Yeah.
And later, the full transcript of the interview was revealed, and it revealed that Roger Scruton was the victim of selective quotation.
There we go.
And therefore, the New Statesman apologised, backing down on their position, and also Scruton was given his position back within the government. But it revealed the weakness of political power in the face of a cultural attack. That's how he phrases it. Which is correct. It's a great way of describing the current situation.
It is.
A Britain where a Conservative government gives over Roger Scruton to the mob is a Britain where conservatism has already been culturally defeated. So a good assessment, I think.
That's true.
It's his opening section in which he talks about what's going on in the UK. And the fact that it wasn't always this way. Now, this is some of the stuff I didn't know. So I just wanted to show you this, the Primrose League. You ever heard of these guys?
No, but I like Empire and Liberty.
Yeah.
That's a great phrase, great catchphrase.
So this is basically the British Conservative Proud Boys from like back in the day.
Right.
And you can see the little pin there, Empire and Liberty being the slogan. And then they had an oath for you to join.
Oh, yeah.
So the oath is, "I declare on my honour and faith that I will devote to my best of my ability the maintenance of religion, the estates of the realm, and the imperial ascendancy of the British Empire." Based.
Well, I didn't want to say it, but okay, yes, fine.
So the Based Club, as you could shorthand them, these were the guys who rose up in the 1800s, 1900s, and were the cultural force of conservatism. back when the Conservative Party was
Well, I've never even
against the
heard of them.
Liberals. Exactly, right? It just completely disappeared. And you couldn't imagine such a thing in British Times existing, just on the hearing about it. Well, let's go through an example of the kind of power that they wielded culturally. So, in 1896, conservatives of all classes and both sexes filled the Royal Opera House for the annual grand habitation of the Primrose League. Outside, a line of carriages extended far up the Strand. By 1910, its membership was around 2 million, making it the largest political organisation with an individual membership in British political history. The largest in all of history, and you've never heard of it.
How is that? How is it the Conservatives haven't kept this alive?
Exactly, right? They let it wither and die. So in December of 2004, after 121 years, the League wound up and gave its last £70,000 to the Conservative Party. It's really sad, isn't it? Like, for something that sounds like, the cultural force of the party, the movement of conservatism in the UK, all the rest of it, was just allowed to, wither and die, and then its wounding up is in 2004.
That's just sad.
Not coming back.
Yeah.
Gone. So he says in here, the kind of positive and unashamed conservatism of the Primrose League, never mind on such a mass scale, has become unthinkable. The simple idea of ringing Big Ben to celebrate Brexit, a cause which, of the major parties, only the Conservatives now back, caused a storm of protests and led ministers to retreat to avoid accusations of triumphantism.
Why shouldn't we be triumphal about leaving the European Union? I mean, it is a genuine victory for Britishness. That was what it was for. I mean, and this is the thing. People just want to talk about the Brexit referendum in economic terms and say, well, this was just about Britain complaining about trade blocs and things like that. No, it was actually a very layered and thick concept that Britain should be sovereign and British, if that's too much to ask.
Yeah, but also just on a purely practical partisan lens instead of the reality of the extra stuff there. This is a Conservative Party victory.
Yes.
You have just won the national election.
A massive victory.
Unbelievably, and then it is a moment of you to be triumphant because you have won, and you should rub their nose in it.
Yes, you can be proud that you're a winner and that the left are losers, as usual.
I didn't want to. And the thing I had to mention when reading this is you have to compare that kind of weakness, frankly, of Conservatives to the Labour movement. Because the Labour movement openly endorses terrorists, petty and large, also has open bigotry against the non-diverse members of our country, and also you can just look at the history of the Fabian Society and its simping for Stalin.
Yep.
And you compare that, and you guys can't even bring up the muster to bing the bong.
Yeah.
Because Brexit.
And if some, I can't swear, I don't want to swear, but some scum from the New Statesman says something that's a lie about Roger Scruton, you can't get rid of him quick enough.
So there's the thing here, which is that the leftists, and I'm going to use that term to mean all people of left-wing persuasion, all the way over to the extremes of the left and whatnot.
From the Liberal Democrats to the Communist Party.
There you go. So they have no shame for the most repugnant elements of their ideology, whereas the Conservatives, as soon as it causes a conflict, they retreat. And the Roger Scruton affair is a great example. Big Ben, also a great example there.
Yeah.
And it wasn't always this way, as the Primrose League points out. And, well, they're now gone, aren't they? So he also gives an example of, well, what does positive British conservatism look like? If you're saying, well, we've lost it. Well, okay, if it's not the Primrose League, what's a modern version? And the great British conservatism it was existing when it was most based, frankly, under Margaret Thatcher, as he puts it. So you take some quotes from people working within Thatcher's government, and they are very revealing. So Thatcher's Chancellor, for example, said, tax reform, like other reforms we have introduced, is in the end about changing the very culture of this country.
Okay.
Not about economics.
To make it more conservative.
Yeah, specifically less socialist, because we're talking about economics here, so it's branded that way. So you didn't want people endlessly thinking in socialist mindsets, because as wonderful as it might be for you to win the election and then win the next one, if you don't change anything culturally, you give that ground to your enemy.
The march of leftism continues and the retreat of conservatism continues.
Yeah, so Thatcher's Chancellor understood this, and he thought of it in that way. There was also a guy on Thatcher's policy team who said, the ultimate purpose of this government is not economic but moral. You were elected to give back to individuals a greater degree of responsibility for the conduct of their own lives.
God, I wish we had conservatives like this now.
Yeah, no one talks like this.
No.
And it was quite revealing to think back and be like, what is this fairyland that exists?
I mean, that was only in the 80s.
Yeah. But Thatcherites understood that they were at war on a cultural basis and they were going to win it. And you don't see conservatives today talking like that. So they were reforming Britain from its socialist culture into one of individual responsibility.
And just to be clear, that's because Britain had just gone through like 2 decades of extreme socialist mismanagement. And so it's at least good that they had a reason to be operating and they knew what they wanted and they knew how they were going to get it.
Yeah, and they practically saved the country from the worst elements of the labour movement.
Absolutely.
So they give some examples of the pushback they got for daring to do what they were voted for.
Was it the media? Was it leftists in the media?
Yeah, how did you guess?
I don't
BBC. Know. So, in 1988, the Today programme aired, quote, Thatcherism, the final solution. Just Sunday night television.
I mean, literal opposite of Nazism is to reduce the scope of government, reduce taxes, make sure everyone is in control of their own lives. And they're like, yeah, so this is basically like being a Nazi.
Their argument was, so it was an item implying that Mrs. Thatcher would favour legalising drugs in order to kill off the unproductive members of society.
Well, is that why they're doing it in California, is it?
Final solution of San Francisco.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, that's the attack she got for trying to enact this culture. It wasn't without...
Was she in favour of legalising drugs?
I don't know. I didn't live at the time. So.
Well, no. Well, I can't remember either, but I can't imagine that she would have been. I would find that really surprising if she was.
But the media didn't hold up. They were very angry at her. This is one of the worst examples given there.
Yeah.
But it's also to demonstrate that if a conservative is like, oh, no, but the media won't like me. Yeah, that's kind of the point. It's kind of the game you're playing.
Yeah.
Like, they are going to, and as Mrs. Thatcher shows, who cares?
It's actually
Move forwards.
Yeah, exactly. Thatcher just kept getting elected and resigned because of a scandal, not because...
Well, because she was pushed out.
Well, yeah, she was pushed out, wasn't it? But she didn't lose an election, basically. But the point though being, if the media don't hate you, are you really a conservative?
Great way of looking at it. Anyway, so he also mentions her strategy. So, quote, keep the left from commandeering institutions of local politics. Mrs. Thatcher would pursue a strategy of reducing such institutions' power. He gives an example. The Greater London Council under Red Ken Livingstone was a very public source of opposition until its abolition.
Based.
I just love how quote that is, and it's just like, wow, these people opposed us, so we just we got rid of them.
Yeah.
Because, well, the government funded, who cares?
Well,
We're
yeah.
the government.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And this is something that all conservatives should take to heart. If the communists are subverting your institutions, then abolish that institution and create a new one that's not communist-filled.
Especially if it's government-funded and you're the government.
Exactly.
You're not oppressing them. If their viewpoint is true, it will find parlance within the private sector.
Yeah. I mean, they can do whatever, they can create all of the tiny, irrelevant communist institutions they want in the private sector, and they're free to do so. Yeah. But we don't have to pay for it.
And they fail. But what's funny, and the reason I'm picking this up, is that they're still salty about her. Like, unbelievably salty about her strategy of just being like, that's a leftist institution. Oh, no, it's gone. So this is a book called Politics UK, and it's just a textbook that you're meant to get for studying politics in the UK. And I've been reading it just to learn stuff. And what's funny is the way they label stuff. So they have a section on pressure groups, and they label it in sections to be like, here's the most sensible, and then at the end, the most extreme. And always on the other pages, it's Marxism at the extreme. It's just like, well, this is an out there version. And here they have Marxism and then Thatcher. So that's just like labeled as the more extreme one. And they say in here, according to the New Right analysis shared by Margaret Thatcher, pressure groups do not enhance democracy as they are primarily interested in their own concerns and not those of wider society.
Obviously true.
Yep.
Yeah.
They represent only a section of society, usually the producers, and leave large groups such as consumers unrepresented.
Or in the modern case, they represent very small slices of ethnic minorities.
The example at the time being the miners' strike, the producers of coal were the ones getting the special treatment that the consumers of coal, the public, were not. They were not getting cheap coal.
Yeah.
So that's an example there. But she says, according to this view, pressure groups short-circuit the proper working of the system by promiscuous influencing of the legislature and the executive, so that the former cannot properly represent the interests of all and the latter cannot implement what has been decided. So
Very good way of looking at it.
totally true, in my opinion. The
Yeah.
pressure groups of the world scum. If you want to be a private group that advocates to the public how they should vote, because if you're interested in this issue, I am too, and therefore we support this party.
Yeah.
That's fine. What is not okay is when you're actively subverting the democratic process of conservative government gets elected, doesn't matter, because all the pressure groups in the inside, in the committees, the ones advising them, groups like Hope Not Hate or all the rest of them.
The ones
are the worst
effectively
extremities.
setting the agenda are all left-wing.
If they're all run by communists on the committees, the public election, what did that matter? Because you can then set the agenda for what is going to happen. And one of the most extreme examples I'm going to give is Hope Not Hate as an organization who advises the government on extremism. Their head of research is a communist member of the Communist Party of Great Britain. This is not someone who should ever advise anyone on what extremism
They're
is.
extremists themselves.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.